Today, moving on from just voters and voting and what the people do, we want to flip on the other side of this relationship and talk a little bit about the government. So we're going to look at things from the political, like the politician side of stuff, the political official side of things, and we're going to look at campaigns today. So we're going to talk about primaries and caucuses and how campaigns are run, especially in the presidential campaign season. Our objective today, we're running out of objectives. I hope you guys are appreciating these. Today, we are going to describe the role of political campaigns. We're going to talk about campaigns and what they do and their approaches to reach people. We need to be able to explain how voters can express their preferences to the government. So campaign season is a way during the elections. Campaigns are a way that the government tries to connect to voters, and then the elections are the ways that the voters express to the government which campaigns they want to be in charge. So today we'll be answering the question of how do campaigns connect voters to the government. First up today, we're going to talk about primaries. Primaries, of course, are the elections that we use to decide who the nominee for the party is going to be. So we'll talk about strategy for primaries and how voters participate in primaries. Here we see Hillary Clinton campaigning for the New Hampshire primary. The New Hampshire primary is the most famous and probably the most important primary because it happens first. So it gives the candidates a big head start to show the voters how successful they can be. When we are talking about a primary election, we are talking about inside one state. We are talking about a single political party in that state. So we're talking about just the voters of a political party inside one state, and they are deciding who their choice for that party's nominee for the election should be. So basically, we're taking, like inside of Tennessee, we would take all the Republicans and they would decide who the Republican nominee for the regular election should be. All the Democrats get together and vote separately among the Democrats for who the Democratic nominee should be. We have primaries for almost all levels of election. So it's like gets a lot of attention. It's real obvious for the presidential election, but we also have these for Senate and House. They'll have these in states for like the governor and for like state senate and all these kind of things. So these happen at all levels of government, and these give us a form of like narrowing down the choices. This is really like a runoff election to help us narrow it down to one Republican and one Democrat. That's the whole point of a political party is election strategy. So they want to make sure that there's only one Republican running so that all Republicans will vote for that person, and one Democrat running so all Democrats will vote for that person. So this is a strategy to help us narrow down the options for the voters. And then we get a lot of attention on the presidential primaries, like that's what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today, but we don't really have a lot of attention paid to the other primaries unless these are people that are really, really involved with the party. Things to remember about a primary are that this election is controlled by the party. It's a party election, so they make the rules. We'll look at some different kinds. Like in some states, they can limit who votes. In other states, they want to make it as open to as many people as possible. But it's the party organization that's going to make decisions about the primary. In each state, the state's party organization will make those decisions. In the primary, the party members are showing on their ballot, they're showing which candidate they prefer. So they know that they are making a choice for which candidate should move forward to the general election. The candidates are competing in the primary to win delegates. Each state is awarded a certain number of delegates, and they're going to go to the national convention. So the primary will decide how many delegates go to either just the winner or get split up among the different nominees. Some states give all their delegates to the winner. Other states give them like based on the proportion of votes that they got. But the delegates, what they're doing here is they're basically like going state to state and collecting almost like electoral votes that are going to be used at the national convention. But the delegates, when they're winning delegates in these, when they're winning delegates in the primaries, that means that their campaign is able to pick the people that will go and cast the vote for the nominee at the national nominating convention. So the primary does three main things. It chooses one nominee. That's a big deal. So now there's one Democrat or there's one Republican that's going forward. That is going to limit the choices of voters, which for a party is a good thing. That may not be the best thing for the voter, but limiting the choices is a good thing for the party because it funnels more groups into your party's votes. This, like we said, same thing here. It brings all the party's members together behind one candidate. Okay, so all the people that associate themselves with Democrats are going to be likely to support the Democratic nominee, even if it wasn't their personal choice as the best Democrat. So this helps to bring the party members together. It helps to limit the choices that voters have to make, and it selects a nominee. The delegates are awarded from each primary. So the delegates are the people that get picked to go to the party's national nominating convention. They're going to cast their ballots for the presidential candidate there. So, like in Tennessee, it will be given a certain number of delegates, and whatever candidate wins Tennessee will get to choose which people serve as the delegates. The people that get picked, the people that serve as delegates, they are loyal party members. This is like a reward for them. So they've been like loyal to the party for a long time. They've like done fundraisers and voted. They donate money, all this kind of stuff. And this is like a reward for them. So like as a reward for their loyalty, they get a trip to the convention and they get to cast a vote for which candidate the voters chose. So it's really a ceremonial thing. They could technically like change their vote when they get there and everything, but since these people are picked for their loyalty, they're the people that are least likely to do so. Primary season is just the time of the year every 4 years when all the primaries take place. So the primaries get started in January. That's when we'll have the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary. And primary season is technically going to last until June, even though it's really going to be over with way before that. But the states that are at the beginning of this time period, they get all the attention, not just New Hampshire, but the other early states like South Carolina, Nevada. Some of these early states get a whole lot of media coverage. And the states toward the end don't really get that much media coverage, but the primaries still happen. The candidates do still campaign in a lot of these states. And their job, what the candidates are trying to do, is they're trying to get 51% of all the delegates in the country. Once a candidate has got 51% of the delegates, they are the nominee for president. And so primary season can potentially last this whole time. It can use up all the states and everything, but usually it's wrapped up pretty early. Before we even get to the primary, we have a time period that we call the invisible primary. There's no like official time period for when this happens. It's just the months or lately even the years leading up to the first caucuses and primaries. So the candidates, way before the elections start, way before the first primary, they're trying to find out how popular they potentially are. So they're like paying attention to polls. They're trying to raise money for their campaign. They're trying to measure their popularity and their success with the voters. You can see on the left, there's a little chart here already for 2024. Just a poll of voters. We see that among Republicans here, Mike Pence, Donald Trump Jr., Nikki Haley, those people are popular. So those people are likely to run. You see some other less popular people there. And if they don't become more popular, those people probably shouldn't run. They'd be wasting a lot of time and money. So in this time period, the candidates are trying to raise money and increase their standing in the polls. If candidates raise money slowly or they're not very successful in the polls, they pretty much quit before the first primary takes place. It is totally normal for candidates to think they have a good chance of running for president, and then when they try to go out there and get support and money, they're not very successful, and so the smart thing to do is to drop out. These contests cost millions of dollars, so you should probably drop out if you're going to lose instead of waste millions of dollars. So the invisible primary helps us narrow down all the potential candidates before the voting even starts. All those people that just can't get their campaign going and aren't popular, they're going to drop out before any of the contests start. Then the first primary, definitely the most famous primary, is the New Hampshire primary. It's always first. In their state constitution, it says that their primary has to be held a week before any other state's primary. So their constitution sets their primary date to automatically be the first one here. For months before this primary starts, candidates campaign in New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a tiny state with very, very few people. They get so much attention all the candidates spend so much time there. The media does all kinds of polling there. They do hundreds and hundreds of polls. We know, get polls from week to week. And then people vote in the New Hampshire primary. And we use the New Hampshire primary to predict the rest of the primary elections. So the New Hampshire primary is the first one. That's going to allow one of the candidates to campaign as a winner, as a person who people already like, and that's going to allow them to build on support. You can see over there in the chart where Donald Trump won the campaign primary, the New Hampshire primary in 2016. So he won the first one, and that really helped him in the remaining primaries. And so winning the New Hampshire primary is so important because the primaries that follow, the voters are going to be way more likely to pay attention to the winner. Remember the bandwagon effect. When a candidate wins early, when a candidate wins a lot, voters are more likely to support them. So the candidate who wins the New Hampshire primary is likely to be the favorite in the next couple of primaries. If they continue to win, that will just kind of snowball. Especially after the New Hampshire primary and the first time the voters get a chance to vote and we see the results, we're going to have a lot of people start to drop out. Especially if they do worse than they thought they were going to do, they should go ahead and drop out now so that they stop wasting money on a campaign that's not going to be successful. The other big primary day to know about is what we call Super Tuesday. This usually comes either at the very beginning of March or late February, and a lot of states around the country hold their primary on the same day. It's a lot of southeastern states. Tennessee is one of the Super Tuesday states. In 2020, California jumped in on Super Tuesday. So it's usually about 12 different states on the same day. So lots of voters are going to the polls at the same day. And sometimes as much as 25% of all of the delegates in the country are at stake. So this is really kind of the day where if it has been close so far, usually the person who is winning the primaries and stuff after Super Tuesday, it's pretty obvious who the Republican and who the Democrat are going to be. Super Tuesday is pretty early. Like we said, primaries go on until June, but usually by late February or early March, we've already pretty much settled who's going to be the Democrat and who's going to be the Republican. We had mentioned that those states at the beginning of the primary get all the attention, and so this is creating a problem called front loading. Front loading is where the states keep moving their own primaries earlier and earlier because they want to get the most attention. So the states that are early, they get tons of media attention. They get a lot of visits from the campaigns and all that kind of stuff. The primaries that take place in May and June, no one pays attention to them. They usually don't even matter. And so states don't want to be those last primaries of the year. The states that are early get more media attention. They also get more visits from the candidates. And so they want to be seen as important states like New Hampshire is. So the parties allow this to happen because the parties kind of want the primaries to happen as early as possible. When the candidates are all running against each other from the same party, you have Democrats fight with Democrats and make each other look bad. You have Republicans fight with Republicans and make each other look bad. And the parties would like to get this out of the way as soon as possible. In the 2020 election, there were 20-something Democrats running against each other and all fighting with each other and making each other look bad. The party leaders got together and convinced all the candidates to drop out except for Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. And that way, the party was able to unify behind Joe Biden and really not damage the image of most of their candidates. So the parties would like to get this over with as early as possible. There's two main types of primaries that we need to make sure we know the difference between. One is called an open primary, which is open to anyone. The other one is a closed primary, which is closed to party members only. In the open primary, anybody can show up and vote. This is what Tennessee uses. When you go to vote in the Tennessee primary, you just go in to vote and they say, which primary are you voting in? You decide right then if you want to vote in the Democrat or Republican primary. This is good because it increases voter turnout. Way more people participate in these primaries because anyone can participate. Since more people are participating, we also have a lot of moderates. So moderates are more likely to win in an open primary since there's more of them able to participate. The downside here is this can lead to I mean, it's not super serious, but it can lead to a little voter sabotage where like really hardcore Republicans can vote in the Democratic primary and they can vote for the candidate that they think is easiest to beat. So since there's no control over who gets to vote, this could open the door to a little bit of sabotage by members of the other party. But that's not a huge concern. It's better to be able to increase voter participation and turnout. In the closed primary, this is only open to party members. You have to be registered with the party in advance. So this is going to make voter turnout go way down because very few people are even registered with their party. But this is what parties want to do when they want to make sure that only the most loyal party members get to choose their nominee for the party. States have different like deadlines for when you have to register with the party. It's a weird story, but in the New York primary in 2016, Trump's own kids couldn't vote for Trump because the parties required that you registered with the party 6 months before the primary, and his kids weren't registered with the Republican Party. So this closes the primary system to a lot of voters, but that way the parties can make sure that only their most loyal members are the ones deciding who the nominee is. The last kind of primary is going to be called a nonpartisan primary. In the media, it's more common for you to hear this called a jungle primary, but like our book will call it a nonpartisan primary. We also call this a blanket primary, and this is where the candidates all run together. Like they're not listed by Democrat or Republican. So they'll be trying to narrow it down to 2 people to run, but they might let all the Republicans and all the Democrats run in the same primary. And this is not used in presidential elections, but it's used in like state level elections, maybe local elections or elections for like the House or Senate. And what you can end up with here is you can end up with a general election where like 2 Republicans did the best in the primary, so they're the ones running against each other. You might have 2 Democrats running against each other. But a jungle primary means that the candidates are not separated by their party identification. The voters who vote in primaries are different. The voters in primaries for one, we said they're only party members on one side. So they tend to be people that are highly informed about elections. They tend to be people that are more liberal or more conservative. They pay a lot of attention to the parties because they're participating in elections just to choose the nominee. The good thing for voters in a primary is it takes very little effort. They just show up and they vote and they leave. It can take as little as 5 minutes. So that doesn't ask much of voters, which is good, but it is usually only the high information voters who are showing up to vote. And it tends to be the voters who care a little more about liberal issues or conservative issues that are voting in the primaries. Moderates are not as likely to care a lot about who the candidates are. So the voters in primaries are very different, and the candidates have to account for that when they're trying to be successful in the primary. All right, that's it for primaries. We have figured out how primaries work. Now we're going to switch over and talk about a little more complicated version of choosing a nominee. We're going to talk about caucuses.